Hey everybody, this is Eddie Babbage, founder CEO of Timeline Genius, your host here of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast, back with another great episode for you. I'm here with Sam Jacobson. He is the founder and co-owner of ID Action, which he describes as a Swiss Army knife for wedding pros who want to grow their business. He's been in business for 7 years with ID Action, but also has 17 years of wedding industry experience based in Washington. And Sam, I'm really excited to have you on the show. And thanks for taking time to be here with me.
Yeah, good to be here with you, Eddie. I've heard great things about you and your product, and how you're always there for planners and everybody in the industry. So glad to have the conversation with you, and hopefully we'll be able to talk shop and help out the audience along the way.
I love it, Sam. Yeah, so, we talked in our pre-interview, and I told you I always love having people on the show who are really squarely focused on the business side of things, which you are. I'll let you speak to your background in just a minute. But I put to you in our pre-interview the sort of hypothetical that I often put to our guests, which is like, if I came to you as a wedding planner a few years into my business, and I was just kind of struggling to really get the profitability I want and to have the sort of work-life balance and to just really feel like I'm in control of my business, what would you do? And what you gave, and I'm just sharing this so people have a preview of where we're going with this interview, you gave me two answers. One kind of as a business coach, which you have a background in. Again, I'll let you speak to that in a moment. And another as a sales coach. So that's what we're going to be covering here. And I think you're very well suited to give people concrete takeaways to help them level up from a business standpoint, from a sales standpoint. Before we get into that, though, Sam, would you mind telling folks in your own words, just kind of giving that overview of your background and how you got to be where you currently are in our industry?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Eddie, for the chance. Yeah, I think like most people who are in the wedding industry, I just kind of stumbled in here on accident and fell in love with it along the way. I had about a dozen years of restaurant experience going back from when I could first drive a car to the local hotel and restaurant and do room service there until I worked at a resort up in Washington State in the San Juan Islands. And eventually, back in 2006, I ended up getting moved over to the events department. The GM of the company came in one day into my restaurant manager's office and said, "Hey, Sam, guess what? You're the new events manager." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good. I don't know anything about events, but I'm happy to do it. I can handle catering for sure." And the previous event manager had left on zero notice to go and take care of a family situation back home. And so I asked him, "When do I start?" He said, "You start in 2 hours with a wedding that we're having." And
Wow.
So I was thrown right into it, and I loved it. I mean, it was everything that I enjoyed about the restaurant, plus none of the stuff that I had gotten bored of over a dozen years. So I started off real quickly and was responsible for selling and servicing and producing the events that we had at our venue with in-house catering. And eventually I moved into more of a supervisory role where I was running a lodging and event department. And I had a role and responsibility that I ended up sticking with, and that was the sales. I just had a knack for it. I was always a sales kid. When I was growing up, I sold lemonade and Kool-Aid, and then I take the profits from that and I roll it back into the company, as a 6-year-old, and make Rice Krispie treats. And then I took those profits and I rolled it back in, and I bought baseball cards and added on a margin and took some profit off of that from the local kids in the neighborhood. It was just how I was born. And I embraced it. I think salespeople get a bad rap, but at the end of the day, we're really just helping people solve problems. And both my parents were therapists, and they did that personally. Eventually, I moved into a position with my own company in 2016 where I was able to help people professionally. And so I started doing work with wedding professionals to grow their business. And what I found is that there was a real gap in the market for sales training, sales coaching. And so that's where I decided to double down in. And then over the course of the last few years, my wife, who has a Four Seasons catering background, joined me and decided to open up a copywriting arm of our company. And so between the two of us, we have a big team, 10 people all together, all working full time for clients around the country, around the globe, working on websites and copywriting, coaching, mastermind, online courses, you name it. We offer it as a way to help wedding professionals grow their business.
Very, very, very cool, and makes me even more excited to get into what we're going to talk about. I have to take note of the fact, though, Sam, that I was very much like you. I was totally that same kid selling blow pops, had friends selling blow pops, then it was Jolly Ranchers, bubblegum. Like there was just always something. And the reason why I mention this, first of all, just to call out the shared connection, because I think there is something to the nature piece of this, the like, just like it's just kind of part of who we are in DNA, like the entrepreneurial. For me, a little less so the sales, but like the entrepreneurial piece of it. But as we get into sales, it's funny because I found myself, it's such a critical skill set if you're in business. And I'm sure this resonates with everybody listening that at a certain point, even in my current venture, I was kind of going down the rabbit hole teaching myself sales stuff. And what you hear, Zig Ziglar comes to mind. I don't know if you've read any of his books,
Mm-hmm.
but he says, sometimes people think like you're just either born that way or you're not. And one line of thought is that no, like anything else, like you train for this. Sales is a skill set that you build and hone over the years. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it's counterintuitive. It's not just that you're some schmarmy, pushy, stereotypical person. In fact, no, you learn to listen to people. Like, where do you come out on the question of nature versus nurture in terms of becoming a good, effective salesperson?
I like both. I think there's some nature. I think there's some nurture. One of the things I hope we get into is how personality and how we're hardwired upstairs really impacts our approach to either operating a business or selling, and it certainly impacts how we make purchase decisions and something we need to know about with our clients who are inquiring. So I do think there's some wiring. I use the same kind of underlying science that informs the DISC assessment, for instance, is something that I use with predictive behavior modeling for selling styles and buyer types. And so I feel like there's definitely some proclivities that we have based on how we approach the world, how we filter the world and interact with it. But all that said, even if you're born on third base when it comes to sales, like I was, for instance, you still have to do more work to get where you want to go. I can't tell you, Eddie, how many years I wasted potential because I felt like I was gifted enough
Right,
to do
right.
well. And
Mhm.
yeah, I did really well. I was always finding myself in sales oriented jobs, whether it was in college, calling for the annual giving fund, or working at a restaurant, or doing direct sales work for weddings and events. But what I realized is that at some point I ran out of natural ability and just didn't realize it. I had been relying on luck and charisma and connections and that raw talent, and had gotten me further than most, but it wouldn't get me as far as I could fully go. And I think it was really only over the last 10 years that I realized through my readings and education and self development in behavioral economics and applied sciences, really focusing on buyer psychology, where I recognized, wow, there's so much more out there to learn. Even if you've already graduated college, you can still get a PhD. And I
Right.
feel like that's the kind of level of coaching that I offer my clients. I can do the undergrad work, but what I think we're really known for and how we really help people is through the graduate level work that provides some nuance and understanding to a skill set that maybe most people felt like was natural.
I love that. And part of the reason why I asked that question, Sam, is because as I do these interviews, I'm always channeling my inner wedding planner, right? Like these are the people that I'm hoping that, this interview can really empower and help. And I just found it to be kind of inspiring, I guess, when that message that even if you don't necessarily think of yourself as like the stereotypical great salesperson who just has all this, like you're just so outgoing, I want people to feel like, and you tell me if this is misguided, I want people to feel like, wait a minute, no, I can do this. Like I can build this muscle. Or maybe you say, Sam, that in some cases, like, no, you should be hiring that. But I happen to think that there are a lot of people listening who are like, look, I'm not in a position to just go out and hire like a dedicated salesperson. It's me doing my wedding planning business. I'm the person who's sitting down belly to belly with my, potential client. And I want to improve. I want to up my game. Like I kind of find it inspiring that like, no, you can. right? If you get the right training, you can improve your sales skills.
Yeah, 100% you can. I don't know a single wedding planner who got into business for herself or himself that was like, I want to plan weddings because I want to sell my services,
Right, right,
right? Like that's just not part of it.
That's not
And I will say that, if you go through and you look at the client base that we have, photographers, number one field that we represent.
Mhm.
Number two is planners. And so
Mhm.
we have a lot of experience working with planners. I have a lot of experience coaching planners, some of the best in the business. And what I can tell you is that at some point, planners tend to fall into one of two camps. One camp is the logistics oriented
Yep,
planning side.
yep,
Then the other camp is the design
no
oriented
doubt.
decor side, right?
Yeah,
Like at some point, there's this natural, fork in the road that they're like, I want to go towards this, and then hire out this other thing, and that's good. That's mature.
there's somebody that's got one foot in both areas, but certainly the vast majority that really resonates with my experience as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we all get there,
Right.
and what's interesting is if you go through and you look at kind of this, again, how people are wired and what they're naturally inclined to either love doing or be good at doing, working from that place of bliss, they're going to find that it's either the logistics or the vision. And what's interesting about a salesperson is a salesperson kind of sits in the middle of that. Like the best salespeople that I know tend to fall into this advisor role that is focused on solving problems. And
Hmm.
so you're identifying the problems, and then you're coming up with creative ways to reorganize the work that needs to be done to then reach the solution so that you can get the desired outcome.
Yeah.
And that really rests in the middle of that visionary and that logistical approach. And so I think that a lot of wedding planners find themselves with kind of that one foot in, yeah, I'm okay at this. There are certain parts of it, but and what we'll get into is that there have to be different ways to sell to different people, different, brides, grooms, parents. And so we need to make sure that we're able to style stretch to meet them where they're at. And I think as you get higher in price and fuller in services that you're offering, there's more work that needs to be done to do that, to style stretch and to sell in different situations differently to different people for different reasons. And so that's where I think a lot of people run into problems. And that's when they call us, as they should, and get the kind of help that they need on understanding what it is, because you can learn how to sell better. In fact, most of the people that I work with are not born salespeople. They have to learn, and that's education. You got to put the work in on.
I love that, Sam. So, again, just kind of going back to what I think is a really good sort of hypothetical scenario that I love to throw out when I'm interviewing, especially folks like you that, again, have this just solid business foundation, is if I came to you, like I said, I'm a few years in, like the planners I know, like it's tough. Like planning weddings is tough. Like in and of itself, there's no do-overs. And as you and I both know, once you're doing this, you're also a business owner, not just a planner. So you've got the business side of this. And when we talked, and I said, if you had just an hour to give me as much impact and help as you could, what I got was a really cool kind of twofold response. The first batch of response was around business coach, and the second around sales coach. Now, under the business heading, in my notes, what I wrote down, I heard a few things. One, operating from a place of bliss. Two, having a clear idea of what success looks like. And three, identifying and connecting with your purpose. Let's get into those 3 points, okay? Let's start. And I know they're interrelated. Operating from a place of bliss. I love that catchphrase. Like, what do you mean? Let's unpack that. And why was that something that came immediately to your mind? Is like, this is what I would talk to you about, Eddie, to help you if you were that planner in need.
Yeah. So I first learned about operating from a place of bliss from my coach, Laura Moriarty, who I worked with 10 years ago now. It was this time 10 years ago that I was really digging into it with her. And she shared with me this Venn diagram that all professionals run into. And that is the three overlapping circles of what does your business need from you? What do you love doing? And what are you good at doing?
Mm,
What does your business need from you?
yeah.
What do you love doing? And what are you good at doing? Now, when all three of those overlap in the middle, that's your place of bliss. When your company needs you to do something, your client needs you to do something, and you are good at it and you love doing it, then it's not work anymore. You're having
Yeah.
fun. You're
Yeah.
you're you're doing things you love to do that you challenge you a little bit, but you know that you're going to be successful at it. And so you don't procrastinate, you don't fight it, you don't dread it. You look forward to it. You hit
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah.
And that's pretty magical. That's that bliss. When you're in flow and it doesn't feel like work, and you look up and it's like, wow, 4 hours just went by. What happened?
Yeah.
And you're ready to get back into it rather than be pulled out of it.
Yep. So, I mean, just to throw something out, because I remember my wife, she's an entrepreneur as well and a coach, and she talks about zone of genius, and you're certainly like conjuring that up. What about the fact, Sam, what about the fact that depending on where I am in the growth of my business, again, I'm kind of channeling my inner planner here. I may be in a situation where I don't have the resources, the money to bring in a team, and things just need to get done. And, look, maybe bookkeeping isn't my favorite part of the job, but this is what I got to do. I got to be the one to do it. Or, sales isn't necessarily my zone of genius, but I need to sell if I'm going to be in business. What about that sort of issue when it's kind of, you don't have the resources to kind of delegate some of the things that you don't want to do?
So I would imagine there's a couple of different things that you could look at. One is to identify if that's actually a true statement, if you really don't have the resources. And I don't know for, individual business owners who are out there if they don't have the resources, but oftentimes what I do see with my clients is that they trip over dimes to pick up pennies.
Mm.
And so you may think I don't have the resources to hire a bookkeeper. But let's just say you're going to spend, I don't know, 5 hours a week, 3 hours a week doing bookkeeping. And
Yep.
so over the course of a year, that could be a couple hundred hours worth of work that
Yep.
you're doing. And so if you look at that couple hundred hours, what could you do if you gave that to somebody else? Sure, you might have to spend $3, $4, $5,000 to have an accountant pick up those couple hundred hours of bookkeeping, but that could free you up to do 3 event management services
Yeah.
for clients, or 2 or 3 partial planning, or it could be 1 full service client. And then you take the money that you earn from that work that you're doing, that you're good at and you love doing, and you can then move it over to pay for the work that needs to be done, but you either don't love doing and you aren't good doing. So I do see it as an expense, but I think that early on when business owners and especially wedding planners are in it and you're bootstrapping it and you're DIYing it and you're doing everything because you don't have money in reserves and you're just trying to fill your calendar, it's
Mhm.
hard to see that. And you probably should keep bootstrapping it. But at that point, when you are so busy that you can't take on more clients because you're DIYing certain parts of your business that you don't like doing or you aren't good at doing, that's when you need to ask yourself, what is the opportunity cost? Not the financial cost, but the opportunity cost of doing this stuff that I hate doing or that I'm not good at doing. How could I instead move that over to somebody else and then fill more of my time earning money and profit to pay for somebody else to do the work that I hate or that I suck at?
I love that. And at the very least, if you've gone through this exercise of intentionally identifying, the things that are not in that sort of that perfect Venn diagram like sweet spot of overlapping the 3 overlapping circles, then at least you're on the lookout for like, okay, I do want to delegate this at some point. But so is that literally the doctor's orders here, Sam? That like if you were coaching me in that hypo that I threw out, you would say, Eddie, you and I are going to talk, or you can go sit quietly for 20 minutes yourself, but I need you to run through the list of activities that are required for your business. And I need you to identify the ones that you're good at. And then I need you to identify the ones that you also like doing. Is that like literally like just an exercise you'd have me do?
It's a great exercise to do. Yeah, what I recommend is going through over a 5-day work week, 7-day work week, whatever it is that you're doing, and
Yeah.
set an alarm for yourself from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. And every hour on the hour, the alarm goes off, and just keep a journal and write down what you're doing
Yeah.
and write down what your energy level is or any immediate thoughts that come up about the activity that you're doing. And then over the course of a week, you could have between 60 and 85 different data points, and you can start to then bucket together those activities that you're doing and what your energy level is at. Your energy level, if it's low, typically that's an indicator that you don't like the work that you're doing. If the energy level is high, it's typically an indicator that you love the work that you're doing. And eventually you'll start to identify it. But there are other things that can be done too, and these are more introspective, and I think are good with the help and advice and guidance of a coach. But one of the things that I love about the angle that I tend to take is that I really dig into the science behind how people make decisions. And so I've been enrolled over the last few years in an applied behavioral economics program out of Texas A&M, and in there, I took a course on psychological motivations and how that impacts marketing and sales. But it also applies to how you look at decision making for your own business. And one of the key elements is to identify what motivates you, what drives you. And there are less than 10 psychological drivers that motivate people to do things. And oftentimes what I find with business owners who are on the verge of burnout or are in burnout is that they have forgotten what it is that initially drove them to start their own company, to do wedding planning. We get caught up in all the negativity, and a lot of that is because we're out of our place of bliss, but it's also because we lost the plot with why we started to do this in the first place.
That's powerful. One thing, because this is a perfect segue, into, these notions of purpose and having a clear idea of what success looks like. But I want to call out one thing. Have you read Ray Dalio's book Principles by chance?
I have not. I have it on my list of things to do. It's a big one,
Yeah.
and so I haven't tackled it yet. But it looks interesting. Have you read it?
I did. It's fascinating, and you're really reminding me. So for those that don't know, he's like one of the most successful investors of all time, like just incredibly bright. And he was like, I wish every successful person did what I'm doing in this book. And the whole conceit of the book is I am going to reflect on my life. And I've over the years, I've just documented various principles that I've learned over the course of my career and just personal life. And I'm just going to share, these are the principles that I use to kind of manage my life. One of his central sort of ideas is really similar to what you're saying, Sam, which is he's like, one of the big mistakes that entrepreneurs make is we think we have to be good at everything. And his point is nobody's great at everything. Everybody at his hedge fund, has literally a baseball card, that has their name, it has their stats. They have these really extensive personality tests. He's like, if this is your zone of genius, we don't want you doing the things that you're not great at. We want to find the people that are great at that thing. And I just found that, because I think I myself, and I'm sure some of the folks listening, without calling anybody out, I'm sure some people you do kind of feel like that as an entrepreneur. It's by nature, you're like, I'm going to get this done. And, that needs to get done. I'm going to go get that done, without really pausing to do the exercise that you suggested of saying does this need to get done? Am I good at it? And do I enjoy it? So I just think that's really powerful advice.
Yeah. I have more experience in operations than I do in sales, even though sales is what I spend most of my time on, because it's so helpful for entrepreneurs, especially in the wedding industry. Our creative types typically don't have a lot of that business or sales angle. And so when I go through and think about how to build a team, and knowing that you have to have these different components, these different baseball cards, different players on the team, different skill sets, different passions, things like that. I think when you can go through as an entrepreneur and identify what is it that you need to spend most of your time doing, that's a good place to start. And then that motivates you to then create success, whatever that might be, so you can then free up more of your time to do that. And so I would just leave people with that advice of tripping over dimes to pick up pennies, identify what is your place of bliss so that you can then work towards that. And then as you go through and you think about decisions that you make, you can reconnect with that sense of purpose, why it is that you do what you do, to motivate you to push through, to be able to pick up that dime and then spend the pennies on having somebody else do the work that you don't want to do or you're not good at doing.
I mean, maybe this is an obvious question, Sam, but how do I And I know what you're saying is true because I've talked to planners that kind of get to that sort of burnout and they have lost the plot. I love that, sort of metaphor. But basically, is it like, how do I kind of tap back into that original purpose, and why is it important to do that? Like, it kind of seems like if I'm running and I'm getting out of gas, like, I don't like, how do I necessarily just reconnect with that purpose that I had at the beginning?
I think it sounds counterintuitive, but a lot of it is just to go back upstream and figure out why you're running into this problem over and over and over again. I read this book called What's Your Problem that talks about how important it is to make sure that you're pulling out the right tools for the right issues that you're running into. There was another one that I read called Upstream. And in the beginning of this book, Upstream, it's by Dan Heath. He's one of two brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, that have written a lot of great books on practical applications for behavioral psychology. And in there, he talks about this couple that's having a picnic in a park by a river, and they're having a nice little conversation. And all of a sudden, they hear this kid screaming from the river, "Help! Help! I can't swim! Help! Help!" So they both run, jump into the river, pull the kid out, bring him on shore, put a towel around him, try to keep him warm. And they're talking to him. And then all of a sudden they hear this other kid, "Help, help, help, help." And so they look in the river and there's another kid floating by. So they run, they jump in the river, they pull this kid up, they bring him on shore, and they hear another kid yelling. And so one of the couple jumps into the river to go and save the kid, and the other one bolts upriver. And she pulls out the kid, gets on land, and yells up after her husband, "Hey, Ted, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm going to go run up there and tackle that jerk who keeps throwing all these kids into the river." All of
Yeah.
this to say that what I see a lot of wedding pros, planners included, maybe planners especially, are dealing with the fallout of a machine that is poorly designed, that is giving them exactly what it is that they're getting. And so the key is to stop worrying about the problems that are on the output and focus on the problems that are on the input. And a lot of that's going to come down to the people that you're saying yes to and what they expect of you
Yeah.
and what you're telling them that you're going to do and deliver for
Yeah.
a price point.
Yeah. Really interesting. Yeah. That upstream, that is so true. You want to be working at the right sort of level of depth, or the right place in the stack to really address the source of an issue. And it's so easy to not be at the right level.
Yeah, a lot of the reasons that we face burnout is, or that we're tired or that we don't enjoy what we do, is because we're working with people that we don't enjoy working with. And so, what we recommend for our clients, wedding professionals, wedding planners, is that you know very clearly all three P's of your ideal client. So price, personality, and project. So
mhm.
what price do you need to feel like you're getting the right amount of money for the services that you're offering? What kind of people do you love working with?
Mm.
And what projects excite you and motivate you and inspire you to do the work that you're going to end up spending 50, 100, 250 or more hours on?
Oh, I
if
love
if
that.
you end up saying yes to the wrong person or the wrong project or at the wrong price, you
Yeah.
end up in a situation where you could have 100, 200, 500 hours of misery in front of you because you said yes to the wrong thing. So I would
Yeah.
keep going upstream and make sure you're saying yes to the right projects. And sometimes you have that luxury, sometimes you don't. I get it, but we should all be thinking about it before we say yes.
I love that, Sam. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and some of that comes from, and shoot me down if you feel differently, but just doing that sort of ideal client, like taking the time to intentionally spell out who your avatar is. But I love all three of those, man. Like the pricing is huge too, because you can have the right person, the right nature of, project. And if the pricing isn't right, you're just running yourself in the ground. And I know I've heard that so much that people are like, when I look at my hourly rate, I should be at McDonald's, like the true hourly rate, like all the time that goes into, delivering, the service that I've, rendered for this amount. So all three of those are really, really powerful. We also talked in the business coach vein, Sam, we talked about making sure that you have a clear idea of what success looks like. I want to have you unpack that a little. It's something that I've talked about on past episodes. We don't have to like go super, super deep, but just this notion that like it's too easy, especially in our Instagram powered, industry, to just kind of look around and to think, oh, well, that's success, like, because that's what that person seems to be chasing. But why for you why was that like one of the key points for you that people should stop and really kind of articulate what their definition of success is?
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
We host a retreat every year down in Costa Rica in November, December time period. And we bring a small group of wedding professionals down and we dig in through an immersive 5-day program. And in the middle of it, we go through and spend time talking about goals before we get the action plan together. And what I find is that most people don't have a very clear sense of what it is that they're trying to achieve. I think we get in on that hamster wheel and that treadmill and we just go, 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 go. We're so focused on the daily execution, we forget that we need to have a strategy. And that strategy has to be directed towards a destination that inspires and motivates and means something to us. Unfortunately, I see that most wedding pros are moving in a direction that is based on old goals that they have or other people's goals that they've seen. You talked about the other people goals. So there's something that happens called mimetic desire. And this is a survival skill, frankly, that we have as human beings that have been passed down through thousands of generations. Those who were able to adapt and look around and see what other people were doing to survive, to thrive, to achieve success, those genes got passed down. Those who couldn't adapt and overcome or imitate their environment were the ones that didn't pass their genes along. They died out. And so we as humans are very adept and very tuned into and constantly seeking, looking left, looking right. What are other people doing to achieve success? How are they finding happiness or nourishment, whatever it might be? And so when we go through and we look at Instagram, imagine how bombarded we are with all of those posts in the feed or the stories that we're sliding through. And we see what quote unquote success looks like for other people. And then we end up adopting that and adapting our strategy to try and reach that. But it may not resonate with us. Another area is that we end up looking back at old goals. I think we all end up starting our business for a certain reason, whatever that might be. But what I do find is that a lot of wedding professionals are driven initially by a motivation called achievement. We want to see a goal set and reached. We want to win, and we want that more than anything. However, I will say at some point, usually, 3, 5 years in, well, however many years it takes you to get to a full calendar, the motivation shifts and our reason for being a business owner shifts, our struggle shifts. And so we're no longer trying to achieve filling a full calendar. And instead, we needed to look at achieving something else, something different. And so it may be that we want to master a new skill. It may be that we want to have more free time. It may be that we want to see our status within our field grow. It could be that we want to empower ourselves to be able to do new things in life. Whatever it might be, our motivation ends up shifting, but our goals, the direction that we're running in, don't shift. And so we run into a challenge then where our day-to-day is not fueled by something that really matters to us.
What I love about what you're saying, Sam, is it's like back to the real core basics, like just core principles of success. Like you need to have a goal. I mean, it's refreshing and good. I feel like the timing is great. We're, in the new year here. You need to know what you're running at. And it can't be that you set a goal 7 years ago and you haven't really revisited that goal in the context of where you are in business and in life. But you need to have that goal and you need to be connected to your purpose, because that's the thing that's going to power you through, the inevitable, challenges and stuff like that. I love that. I feel like that's really good, just sage, fundamental advice. I want to segue into, Sam, the sales piece of this, because we talked about that. Like I said, you gave me the business on it. We kind of squarely hit some of these fundamental business principles, but there's also a sales component. And I want to tee this up by saying a lot of planners I know, they'll say, well, if I can get that actual meeting, that sit down meeting with a client, I'm pretty good at closing the deal. And I want to throw that out because I think what I loved about what you were talking about was like the sales system piece of it, right? Sales is not just that narrow piece of like, okay, when I'm meeting with this person, can I close the deal? It's the whole sort of infrastructure that you have to bring people in the door, nurture them. And that's where I do believe a lot of planners I know have a need. And, I know that people, even if they've been in business for years, and even if last year was successful, a lot of planners I know, they have this fear that like, okay, but I got to start again fresh this year. And there's no guarantee that I'm going to get people in the door. Like, how can you kind of with your sales experience help people address that fear of like, okay, how do I know that I'm going to get people again? What is my sort of system for getting clients, the right clients in the door and booked?
So there's no guarantee. That's I think that's probably one of the first things to accept is that you can't control the outcome. All you can do is influence the outcome through doing the right activities and putting the work in. That's the key. And so, I liken it to like, again, new year, new you. And so think about one of the things that most people do is set up new health goals, right? And, it's typically tied to like, I want to lose 15 pounds or whatever it might be. But you can't sit on the couch eating pizza and binging Netflix shows and hope that your goal will be met just because you wrote it down or you want it to happen. You actually have to do the things or stop doing some of the things to be able to reach your goal. There's only a couple of things really that you can do aside from taking a pill or having surgery. You have to either move more and or eat less. or eat healthier. Like that's it. Those are the things that you've got to do. When it comes to sales, the activities that you need to do are actually fairly simple. You need to build value, create desire, and provide reassurance. That is what you are always doing in the buyer's journey, whether that's through social media or your referral strategy, a listing site, SEO, blog posts, your website, inquiry response, discovery calls, proposals. You are always building value, creating desire, and providing reassurance. The ways that you do that are also threefold. One, creating a sales process that is designed around how human beings buy. Number two, operating that sales process using situational selling approaches. AKA shifting how you sell based around the buyer that you're working with. And then the third thing is making sure that you are communicating the right messages to trigger the buyer's biggest desires that will help instill that value that you're hoping to justify that high price. So sales process, sales skills, and sales messages. What I find is that a lot of wedding professionals are lacking in all three areas. The first thing to fix is the sales process, that sales workflow. And planners oftentimes skip over some of the things they need to do, especially early on, and get right into planning the wedding before they've ever even booked a client or figured out if they're the right one for them to plan the wedding for in the first place.
I love that, Sam. I love the breakdown here. Let's go through each of those top three components: building value, creating desire, providing reassurance. Obviously, they're to some degree pretty straightforward, but I want to kind of unpack them. Talk to me about when you say build value, what does that mean?
So one of my favorite reports or studies that I've found over the last 10 years in the research that I've done on buyer psychology is a report written by 3 Bain & Company partners who specialize in pricing. And it was published in the Harvard Business Review back in 2016. Anybody can go through and look at it for free. It's called The Elements of Value. And in this report, the partners for Bain & Company broke down what solutions businesses offer for their customers and how that creates value in the mind of the buyer. And they broke it down into 30 different unique components that individual companies can choose from to create value for their buyers. And it could be a breadth, so like a wider range of value components that you build into the value proposition, or it could be that you only do a few, but you do them really, really well. And so it could be a deep approach to building value, wide or deep or both. And so not only are there 30 different components that you get to choose from, but there are 4 tiers of value. The entry-level tier are the functional needs, things like saving time, reducing hassle, connecting with vendors, things like that. But on the second tier, you have emotional value that you create for your buyers. So things like offering a sense of nostalgia or reducing anxiety or making the process and experience fun. And then if you go up in value, you run into what they call life-changing, or I call social value. And that would be things like motivating them, providing hope that their wedding is going to be amazing, or creating an heirloom, a legacy of experiences. And then at the very top is the self-transcendence, and that's not really one that we deal with in the wedding industry. So when we go through and we think about building value, we want to identify what are the specific problems that we solve for our clients with solutions that we offer. How can we focus on the most meaningful, impactful solutions for that particular buyer, and then communicate those in the sales process specifically so that they get why it is that we're charging the price that we charge. The challenge that I see most wedding planners specifically run into is that everybody's focused on functional value, functional surface level things that they need. I help you with a vendor list. I create this timeline for you. I will attend this meeting in your place. I will cut through the noise. Those are all important things, but they don't trigger the emotional desires that your couples have. And so we really want to focus on that to build value and to create desire for the emotional needs that they have rather than just the surface level needs.
When you say build, I love that, by the way, Sam. And I think we've all, well, I don't know, maybe we haven't all heard, but like that we're very emotional creatures, right? Like I don't buy just saving time. I buy like the feeling that goes, like you start getting people to feel a certain way, and then you're going to get much more sort of response out of them. But when you're saying building value, does that mean going through very intentionally and strategically and nailing down your value proposition as a wedding industry professional? Is that what you mean building value? Or are you actually speaking to the delivery and fulfillment of the service that's rendering that value? Or is it a little bit of both?
It's both. It's both. What you're talking about, the difference between features and benefits. So the first thing that you need to do, and we touched on this a few minutes ago, is that you've got to identify your ideal client avatar. Now, I want
Right
to
on.
be clear. I've always gone with my gut, up until 10 years ago. I'm like, I can sense what I need to do
Right. Right.
to market and sell. But, that's a gift that I had. And again, it only got me so far. What I've realized after poo-pooing the idea of an ideal client avatar and going through this applied behavioral economics program is how crucial it is, especially if, like we talked about earlier, you want to solve the upstream problem, which is that you're attracting bad buyers.
Right.
So doing work on your ideal client avatar, but not just stopping at like the demographics. You want to get into the ethographics, their values and beliefs. You want to get
Right.
into those psychographics. What are their attitudes and behaviors? What motivates them
Right.
inside their emotional brain to make decisions? And so when you go through and you think about how to build value or create desire, you start off with, who is your ideal client? What do they value? What do they believe in? And most importantly, what motivates them? What are their biggest desires and concerns? So you start with that and say that's like column 1, and you come up with the top 5 things. And I'm just going to make something up here to make this more concrete. I'm at your wedding planner. And so let's just say one of your clients, biggest desires or biggest stress points is the budget. Okay. That's something that we all run into. And so let's say that's a big desire or concern. So then that's a problem that your client has. Now, what you need to do is talk about the solution that you offer as a business to that customer's problem. So let's say that your solution includes identifying what are their specific biggest priorities and interests with their weddings, and what are the things that they don't really care about that other people might, that you don't feel like you need to include in the budget. So you sit down and you do a 2-hour deep dive to identify their priorities, their non-negotiables, and the things, frankly, that they don't care about. And then you come back with a range of 3 different budgets with a low, middle, and high based on their priorities and the look, mood, feel, vibe of their wedding that they're looking at. And then they get to stay in control by having options along the way at a low, middle, and high for each of the main expenses that they're going to run into. Okay, so let's say that's what you do. So then the benefit that you offer and the messages that you want to create is that you help reduce time and eliminate hassle by connecting them with a variety of vendors that are all going to meet their needs. And you will reduce their anxiety of being forced into a situation to spend more than they had hoped by making sure that they have control of the situation and can plan things out in a way that feels good for them. So you start off with your ideal client, you identify what you do specifically, but you focus on the last part, the benefits, the value that you offer. And you talk about that in a way on your social media, on your website, with your copy, in your discovery call, with the questions that you ask them, and then on your proposal.
Desire, right? Like
that's right.
The desire.
You're creating that through line of desire for those things by priming them early on in the marketing material, by really accentuating it as one of the services that you offer in your website, on your storefront. And then you're honing in on it like a laser beam in the sales process on the discovery call. So by the time they get the proposal and they're looking at all the things that you offer, they're not focused on the bullet points, the features. They're focused on the benefit statements that you should be including in your proposal that say, this is what you get. This is the emotional feeling that you're going to realize when you get my services. Don't pay attention to the bullet points that look like everybody else's. Pay attention to these benefit bombs that I'm dropping below the package options that are going to convince you that I'm going to give you ultimately what you need at that emotional level.
And what about the providing reassurance? So I get now the building value. I get now the creating desire. What's the providing reassurance? That third leg of the stool.
So that's social proof. And it's one of the biggest principles of influence that we know of. Human beings are herd animals. We're social animals. We like the power of the pack. When we see a path that somebody else has marched down and we know that they're at the end smiling and, toasting us with an umbrella drink on a beach because they've made it to success, we want to follow that same path to get there. And so there are lots of different ways that you can provide that path for them, that reassurance that if they go down this route with you as their service provider, as their planner for their wedding, that they're going to achieve the kind of success that they want to. You can get testimonials from couples. You can get testimonials from parents. You can get testimonials from vendors like venues that you work with, from publications, an editor that loves your work. You can provide social proof through the number of 5-star reviews that you have. Every time somebody pulls up your business on Google and looks at the search engine results page and sees your Google business profile and looks over and sees not just how many stars, but how many people have contributed to your reviews, that is all social proof. You want to build that up. Any kind of badges of publications or magazines that you've been featured in, any awards or distinguishments that you've received, you want to put those into the sales process. And it's really important to make sure that you're putting them throughout the buyer's journey, but most importantly, at the end of the buyer's journey on your proposal, because what we know about complex sales transactions is that at the end of the decision-making process, it's not what you do. It's not what they need. It's not even how much it costs. It's, will this get me what I want or will it not? That is at the top of the mind of the buyer. Risk. Risk is the thing that you're trying to reverse, and social proof is the best way for you to do that.
Man, love it. Knowledge bombs, love it. So remind me here, Sam, and I see we're heading into the tail of our interview here. I knew the time would fly. Build value, create desire, provide reassurance. And then under that, there are 3 points: create your sales process, operate it, and communicate the right messages. Tell me again how those last 3 points fit within the broader context of that 3-legged stool we talked about.
So let's take, for example, what most people try and do is they try and operate a broken system. This is the thing that I see most frequently with wedding planners, with wedding professionals in general. If you gave me a broken sales process, I would never find a way to reach complete and ultimate success with it. There would always be more that's out there, because I could only operate the system as well as it's allowed me to find success. And so the first thing we have to do is fix the broken system. Here are some things that are, for instance, broken. I'll give you some kind of common mistakes that I see a lot of wedding planners, wedding pros make. Number 1, overly complex and arduous and difficult to answer questions in the contact form. The goal of the contact form is to get the couple to contact you. It is not to get all of the information about them and their family and their fiance and their wedding and how much they're spending and what they want the wedding to look like. That is not going to work very well on the long run. So overly arduous and difficult to fill out contact form. Number 2, sending a pricing guide with pricing specifics and package specifics on the initial inquiry. I liken this to getting married on the first date. Let's imagine that you reached out to somebody on a dating app or a dating site, and you were like, "Hey, you want to go out for a cup of coffee or dinner?" And you responded with, "Let me tell you about what God I prayed to, who I voted for, how much money I make, what I like to do, how many kids I want to have, and the names of all of the kids when I do have them, where I want to live and what style of furniture I want to have. And oh, by the way, if you like all of these things, then please reach out to me and let me know if you still want to go on that date." That is what most wedding planners, most wedding pros are sending out on the initial inquiry response. It's too much. The goal of the initial inquiry response is to pre-qualify with a starting at price. Here's what my services start at. And if you're interested in learning about how I can create an amazing celebration like the portfolio that you've seen at that starting at price, I would love to have a conversation to learn more about what you have in mind, what's important for you, and to get enough information so I can share some specifics with you afterwards. That is the goal of the inquiry response. Another big mistake that I see people do is trying to sell their services, their packages and pricing on the discovery call, or what I see a lot of wedding planners call a consultation. So they listen, typical mistake that I see is they warm up, they ask the couple about themselves. So how'd you two meet? Why do you love each other? How did he propose? That kind of stuff. And then they go into, well, tell me about, what you have in mind for your wedding. And then once that's done, they launch into either sharing a screen or reading from a script about why they're amazing, the services they offer, what they include, how much it costs. And then they go, okay, great. So does any of that sound interesting to you? Right. Instead, what we want to do is we want to create a 2-call approach. First call, discovery call. Then we want to send out a proposal for services. And we want to have a second call. We'll review the proposal and go over the packages and pricing with as many of the decision makers as we can. So don't sell on the first call. You want to truly just connect with and discover what it is that your couple needs. Then you want to send out a proposal. And then you want to do a second call with at least a fiance, if not anybody else, like the parents who are involved in making the decision. So planners, if you're listening to this, please stretch out, have more dates. Don't try and get married on the first date. Instead, connect with, build rapport, build trust, build vulnerability opportunities. And then when you can help your couple identify what it is they want and really need from you as a wedding planner, as a guide, then you offer your services as a solution to the problems that you've helped them identify. If you do it all at once, it's just too much. And that's where you're losing people. So those are 3 big mistakes that I typically see. Long contact form with difficult questions, scaring the crap out of people with your pricing guide, and then blowing it on the discovery call by trying to get married on the first date and doing it all on one call instead of stretching it out to 2.
Oh, I love that. Boy, you condensed a lot into a little time. I love that, Sam. Really, really helpful. I have one more question that everybody that listens to the podcast, they'll know what's coming. But before I give that to you, I do want to do a quick aside and let folks know, if you're a planner out there and you're still doing your timelines in like Google Docs or Google Sheets or Stone tablets or whatever tool you're using, I want you to know that Timeline Genius is around, and I do humbly and sincerely say that it's the world's best tool for creating, collaborating on, and executing wedding day timelines. You can check it out if you go to timelinegenius.com. Just watch the video on the homepage, and I think you'll be blown away. There's a full product tour that you can also select, or just get in touch. Send us an email. Love to give you a tour, but it really takes the time and hassle out of creating timelines and lets you do things like set text reminders to automatically go off. You really just look like a rock star, and applying a lot of the things that you're talking about, Sam. Like, this is right back to that core sort of principle of, you don't need to be spending, 5 hours moving items around on a timeline. If you can save that time and operate in your zone of genius and do those things that you're great at, that really like re-engineering and re-architecting, improving your sales process. So anyway, timelinegenius.com, check it out. Sam, my last question for you is, and this is one I ask of all our guests, if you could give one piece of advice based on all of your extensive business and sales experience, everything you've learned over the years, that would be as helpful as possible, just that one thing that you like, if I could put this advice on a billboard for people in this industry right now, like, what would that one piece of advice be?
It's stop tripping over dimes to pick up pennies, which I already said and I already talked about. So that's absolutely.
Why is that at the top of the list for you?
That's at the top of the list. I think another thing that's kind of more of a tactical, practical opportunity for everybody who's listening is people need more than a phone call with you to buy your services. You need to develop a complete buyer's journey and buying experience that starts from the moment they walk into your store and ends with the moment they get your contract. I think that over the years, even as a salesperson, I've recognized that we all have our limits, because so much of the buying experience is done online before you ever get to talk with somebody. And especially with a wedding, there's so much behind the scenes with the fiance and the family that goes on that you don't have an opportunity to influence or impact. And so my biggest piece of advice, if I could wave a magic wand over the wedding industry, wedding planners specifically, is you need to double, triple, quadruple down on your collateral. Your online collateral, specifically your website and your proposal. Those are the 2 things that you have to make sure are 100% dialed in and are truly extraordinary, in the sense that they are extraordinary compared to the other people that they might be looking at. It's one of the reasons why 4 years ago, my wife and I, who works with me, decided to get into website development, copywriting, and proposal communication, because this is where you make your money. This is where you stand out, and this is where you build the value, create the desire, and provide the reassurance that other planners aren't. It's hard to get in front of the decision makers. Give up on it. Don't hope that you're going to get a couple that's going to want to jump on the call and have everybody there and talk for a couple of hours about their wedding and then give you a bunch of money. That's not how it works anymore. I've been doing this for 17 years. It may have been like that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it kind of moved online. And since the pandemic, people are very, very comfortable making most of their purchase decision without ever talking to a human being. which means that you got to find a way to infuse you onto your website, into your inquiry collateral, and then eventually onto your custom proposal that you send out to each client.
That's powerful stuff, Sam. If people want to go deeper, if they want to potentially work with you and your wife, like, can you just give a quick overview of the services that you provide and how people can contact you?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eddie. You know, I would say take advantage of all the free stuff you possibly can. That's always the best place to start. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're a podcast listener. I've got my own. It's called Own Your Business. In there, I offer 20 to 45-minute little slices of sales pricing, copywriting advice, specifically for wedding pros. That's a great place to start. Also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to at the bottom of our website. Over 6,000 wedding pros get that. 3-minute ideas, weekly little nugget of goodness. If you wanted to get started with some services, as I mentioned toward the end, I think your website is probably the best place to start. It's important to make sure you're getting enough input to your pipeline before you worry about even doing anything with the pipeline. So we have a half-off website special that we'll share with you, Eddie. We can give you a link in the show notes if you want to click on it, or you can go to our website, ideactionconsulting.com, go to services, go to copywriting, and then go down to the bottom. You'll see there's a link there that we'll put in a little code for everybody, and you guys can have access to that. That's a really great place to start. If you feel like you're doing pretty well right now and you really want to level up, we do have a mastermind that we launch once a year in February, where we do an elevated understanding of how to build your marketing, sales, and service at the luxury level. We offer the Shift Retreat every year down in Costa Rica. This year it's going to be in November, the 17th through 22nd. That's another opportunity. And we also have a library of marketing and sales masterclasses that you can have access to and are yours forever to learn from. So those are some places you can start, or if you're already in a good spot, you can level up.
I love it, Sam. You're a rock star. And this interview was all that I was hoping it would be. And I hope that everybody that listened to it got some juicy, relevant advice to help them level up their business, as you said. So on behalf of our Timeline Genius community and all of our Wedding Industry Insider podcast listeners, just want to say thank you, Sam, for sharing your pearls of wisdom and your time here. We really appreciate it.